the one thing that is the constant is there is nothing that's ever the same. Many of these wells, it's interesting as we study these wells, each one has their very own personality. Everything from the amount of gas that they're emitting or the amount of fluid that they're emitting to what's happening downhole in terms of the pressure or the temperature. But essentially what we do, our process is we go through and...
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Well, welcome. I'm really, really excited to have you on. Thank you very much for joining me. I've been following everything that you guys are doing. And everybody else, as you guys log in, please drop in, say hello, leave a little note. I know that there will be a message that goes out here pretty soon. So as you guys do log in, say hello, let us know where you're joining from. And a reminder, follow us on or subscribe so that you know or get notices when we're going live. We are this week going live today and then again on Thursday, which I'm really excited about. And then we also have a cool farmers meeting this afternoon. It's at 1:00 where Andrew Bish is going to go over his seed trials and all of the information and data he's been able to collect over the last year. And so that's exciting. In fact, Curtis, this is what part of my, one of my most exciting jobs I've ever had. And had somebody said I would get pumped up or excited about seed trials, I would have laughed at them. I'm like, yeah. What? But it's very cool watching all of these companies. And I'm sure that you, and especially working over with IND Hemp, have been able to see some of this on what's growing where and how the industry's growing and what's needed. And I really thought Texas was going to boom and take off. And it's been shocking to see how little hemp has been grown down there or what's been successful compared. And so, yeah, it's always interesting. But I'm really excited to have you on. Curtis, thanks for joining. Do you mind giving a quick intro for us? Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, your background.
Sure, you bet. No, Mandi, thanks so much for the opportunity. And sorry it's taken so long to get connected here, but we've been...
You're busy?
Yeah, we've been a little busy. All of us have been. And so, no. So my name is Curtis Shuck, and I'm the chairman of the Well Done Foundation. The Well Done Foundation is a 501c3 public benefit corporation formed in Montana in the fall of 2019. And it really came as the result of me literally being in the field with some pulse farmers in northern Montana and Montana's Golden Triangle area, which many of you had an opportunity to visit last year as part of the hemp meeting out at Fort Benton with the folks from IND Hemp. Mm-hmm. I was in the field. In the field with several farmers and was taking a look at their crops. So back to your discussion of being excited about seed trials and following plots through the year. This was kind of one of those programs where the farmers were excited to be showing me what was happening on the pea and lentil side. And obviously that region is very famous for the wheat production, spring wheat and winter wheat, very strong up in that area. But they have diversified to these rotational crops so that they can take that that fallow rotation and actually have something happen with it. And that was exciting to get out and see. And so as I was on the ground up in northern Toole County, about 15 miles from the Canadian border, happened to come across kind of a junk pile laying in the middle of this farmer's field. And I couldn't believe that, nobody had cleaned it up. It's like, well, what's with this? And then, he started to explain that, well, this is really, it's more than just, what seems to be oil field trash. And and steel and wood and plastic buckets and sort of the leftover remnants from industrial activity. And he said it's part of an orphan well site, and there are actually, if you look around, and I started to look around, there are tank batteries and flow lines and pump jacks and literally open casings venting gas into the atmosphere. And it's one of these things that once you see one, then it's easy to sort of recognize the others that maybe you missed because you didn't really know what you were looking at. So
Right.
then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me! Like I had no idea that that orphan wells were even a thing or a problem. I grew up in Alaska, worked in the oil and gas industry in the early 1980s is my first, hitch on the Alaskan North Slope. From there, I got involved in lots of projects on the refined space in supply chain and in delivery and project development for both refineries and mostly on the port and the shipping side, and then moved into the rail component and ran a business in North Dakota for several years in the Bakken in the heat of the fray there. And I had never seen any site that was left looking like what I saw up there. I couldn't believe it. And so after we met with the farmers that day and we were working with them to try to get their products to market, using some alternative methods, I just couldn't get those images out of my mind. And so the whole drive back from Shelby down to Bozeman, where I was living at the time, was just spent sort of reminiscing of what I had seen. And then all of a sudden this, kind of idea came to mind about, there must be something that can be done about it. And then looking at that, understanding that, gosh, it's not just a Montana problem. This is like massive. And then, exploring what's happening on the methane emission side. And so from the time I left Shelby to the time where I arrived back in Bozeman at about 1:30 that morning, that next morning, I'd already sort of had the domain name secured for the Well Done Foundation and had this whole sort of sketched out playbook, kind of detailing the plan of attack. And I was on the phone with my wife, and so needless to say, I didn't get a lot of sleep that night. And it's, now here I am, sitting in a hotel room in Shreveport, Louisiana, staring down a several hundred well project, working with the regulatory agencies and figuring out how we're going to get a couple plugged here before Christmas. So
Awesome. So tell me about this plug for those that don't understand. Like, what does it mean to plug a well, and why is this important? Like, what is it emitting? What are we doing? Because I kind of spoke about this in the beginning, that I have a little town here in Utah that is an oil field town, that's an oil and farm, actually, right? That I look at all these unplugged wells or abandoned wells that are perfect opportunity. So can you talk to me a little bit about why is it important? Why for those that don't understand?
Sure. So, many of, so first of all, an oil and gas well, is drilled into a formation of, various depths. And what it does is it creates then a pathway to be able to extract minerals from that formation. And those minerals come in liquid and gas form. And so typically those operators then would go in and obtain a lease from the oil and gas mineral owner. And as you know, in the United States, many of the ownerships are what's referred to as a split estate, where you've got a different person who owns the surface than the person who owns the minerals below. And oftentimes the mineral right owners' rights are actually superior to the surface owner's rights. So in other words, because you own the minerals, you still have 100% access across the surface and can can build roads and pipelines and set up shop and, produce. And remember, we've got everybody from great actors to not so great actors, and they can leave any varying number of a mess. And so these wells are drilled and are produced for many years. A lot of the work that we do, Mandi, are in what are referred to as stripper fields or legacy oil and gas fields, which means that they're typically kind of at the end of their useful life cycle, are marginal producers. They're essentially like played out, if you would, or, just kind of just not really producing at great levels. It's not like being in the Permian Basin, for instance, in Texas, or in the Bakken field in North Dakota, or the Marcellus Shale back in Pennsylvania, where if there was really an opportunity economically, somebody would come in and swoop up the asset. Well, these are sort of, like I said, not really desirable financially. So oftentimes, while they may have originally been developed by, larger or major even oil companies, many of these wells that we're working on now are literally 100 years old. I mean, the well we just plugged in Pennsylvania was drilled in the 1860s. And so, I mean, it's like, some of these are quite old. And so, finding the records on the wells are difficult, and, understanding what's really happening subsurface. But once a company, these wells trade hands multiple times, and at the end of the day, a lot of the wells in the areas that we're working were once or last owned by kind of mom and pop oil companies. And, think a mom and pop kettle out there running around. And that's, again, some are better than others in terms of their housekeeping and the way that they do business. But so once these wells then are sort of left unattended, and sometimes through bankruptcy or any kind of bad luck situation, they
the ebb and flow of the industry alone. I mean,
exactly. It's a commodity market, and obviously enjoying an up cycle right now, but sure enough, it's going to be, it'll come crashing back down just like it always does. And so you see then that those assets get just turned over to the state. I mean, they have nowhere else to go. So by default, states become the responsible parties, and oftentimes, especially in these legacy assets, there may have been a certain level of financial assurance or a bond that was associated with that well. But think of it, a well that was drilled in the early 1900s, it may have posted a bond of, which at that time was big money, a couple $100, obviously is not even a drop in the bucket to really, make things right in terms of plugging and abandonment. So what's happened is that there has been this huge unfunded liability then that the states have ended up with by default, really no fault of their own. And, certain states have various programs where, they'll get other operators to participate in funding, avenues for helping to abandoned wells. But what can happen is that, again, our elected officials have other bright, shiny objects that require, and, all, I'm sure, very legitimate projects that require funding. So it's easy if you got a bucket of money, that's where you go for. And so, again, it's been a difficult challenge. But what's happening now in many of these assets that are aging and are derelict or sort of unkept, they're starting to leak methane gas. They're starting to leak oil to the surface. Some have water and gas or water and oil flowing out of them. And it's a significant problem. The Well Done Foundation's primary focus has been on air emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. That's really kind of our sweet spot, if you would. But we often find projects that have kind of a combination of multiple things. They've got oil present, they've got greenhouse gas present. Some of these wells, like we're working in now here in Louisiana, as you can imagine, have water quality issues. I mean, literally, we're working in an area referred to as the Black Bayou right now, and you can imagine some of the wildlife sensitivities and the water quality issues that we're facing. So yeah, it can get pretty complex pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, it's really about putting an engineered solution into the wellbore that stops the transmission of fluid or gas from the formation to the surface.
Okay, so how are they filled? And I imagine when I think about this, it's just like a little plug. What does it look like to fill them? And what's the process look like?
So the process is the one thing that is the constant is there is nothing that's ever the same. Many of these wells. Well, it's interesting as we study these wells. Each one has their very own personality. Everything from the amount of gas that they're emitting or the amount of fluid that they're emitting to what's happening downhole in terms of the pressure or the temperature. But essentially what we do, our process is we go through and we identify wells that are sort of in that orphan space, and we look to qualify them into our program. And our criteria for qualification really is around, is a well emitting greenhouse gases? Is it emitting or flowing oil to the surface? And then what is it that we need to do to put an engineered plug in? And an engineered plug in many cases is not necessarily a mechanical device. Now, there are some that use a mechanical device to help to isolate zones between freshwater aquifers.
Sure.
But primarily, the work that we're doing, again, tend to be on what's referred to as a conventional well, which is a vertical well. Mm-hmm. These are anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500 feet in depth. And so what we use is a cement design that we use as a plugging component, the material to actually pump down into the wellbore. And by doing that, and again, every well is a little bit differently configured, but we have teams that we work with across the country where we design a specific plug. That plug then goes to the regulatory agency for review and approval. Oftentimes, and this is all based on industry standards, so we work very closely with the American Petroleum Institute, and this is like tried and true process and material that's been going on for 100 years. We'll talk a little bit about some of those improvements that we're doing to the mix design now and enhancing that through the use of industrial hemp. But so we developed this cement plug. And sometimes we'll actually be putting in a spacer using like bentonite clay or other gel products. And oftentimes that is to help to create a more robust or interstitial plug to keep gas from migrating not only up the wellbore itself, but then also it can migrate from outside of the wellbore around the outside of the casing. So we've got several designs that we use, but at the core of it is really it's the cement product that we place in the wellbore to take up that void and also extend beyond the casing, which oftentimes, again, a well is 100 years old. They have had lots of corrosion issues due to the nature of the gas or the nature of the oil or the salt water. And so, again, we want that plug material to be able to not only stay in the casing itself, but to permeate outside of the casing to create that better barrier so that gas won't make its way to surface.
Okay. So talk to me about the hemp. This is the part that's the most exciting. And I'm curious what improvement, what does what is that difference when using hemp? I keep getting a number that's calling me, and I don't know why my phone is not. It's
Well,
so
there must be tuned into the show. So,
yeah, it's a number. So I hope it's not somebody calling to say my kids something's happened. So we'll
yeah, we
see.
don't want that. That's for sure. It's somebody trying to sell you an extended warranty policy on your vehicle, right?
Always a lifeline. Always.
Yeah. Yeah. So the use of cement and hemp in our cement program, for me, has been kind of an interesting discovery. When the first well we plugged on Earth Day back in 2020, again in the midst of the pandemic and mass craziness and full lockdowns across the country, and we're out plugging wells. Good news is it's out in the middle of the country in the open air, so we were we're able to execute that safely. But as we started our first work in the plug design itself, the first stage of plugging is referred to as the bottom plug, and the bottom plug is kind of a great unknown because many of these wells, as I said, you don't really have great records on what the well was like when they first drilled it, and then when they completed it, what type of activities they did there, and then what has taken place as the operator has potentially been, enhancing the well through either, the use of things like nitroglycerin. Many of these old wells are called shot hole wells, which means they drilled the well, they set the casing, and then they had some guy running around named Nitro Charlie. Literally, some of these wells had as many as 200 quarts of nitroglycerin that were exploded down in the surface or down below the surface in the formation it was kind of the early days of hydraulic fracturing, to open up this pathway for the oil and gas to be able to flow into the wellbore. So you never really know what you're dealing with there. And sometimes you end up with what we refer to affectionately as a glory hole, which is some massive cavern that you really don't have great eyes on. So you kind of run in blind and start putting cement down into this lower plug. In a perfect world, we typically, for our design, in fact, Mandi, what we'll do is we'll calculate the anticipated volume, and then we'll give 100% extra on top of that, just to make sure that we've got enough. And so, but there are times when we'll set a bottom plug and we'll come back the next day and the cement has found its way into the formation, and we have to sort of rinse and repeat. We've had a couple of wells. We had one well we were on, actually it was this year's Earth Day well. We were actually on that well for 21 days, and it drank a lot of cement on us. And so that's where the use of this industrial hemp is really critical. And what we use it for is called lost circulation material. And what it does, because the cement that we put into the wellbore, it's not like you think about coming in the cement mixer truck to your ready mix truck to your house. This is essentially just cement, Portland cement, and water. So it's very viscous. It's a very, slurry-like material that likes to, find its equilibrium quickly. So it doesn't necessarily like to stand up. It likes to just run flat. And so what we do then is we use the industrial hemp product, and it's a hemp herd. And huge shout out to the team at IND Hemp who have been working with us on this Montana made product that's, we've been debuting across the country here with great success. And what that product does is it actually helps then that cement to have some substance to it. The hemp herd, what it does is it helps to bridge that product running into the formation, as well as the product, of course, when it hydrates, then starts to swell up And so it absorbs the moisture in its surroundings. So, and it will have a little bit of swell. So not only does it help the fibers help to create a bridge from it entering into the formation, it also swells, which builds, if you would, the volume of the product. So ultimately, what we use the industrial hemp for in this application is primarily in that bottom plug to get that that cement, if you would, to stand up and come up into the casing or up into the wellbore. And it's interesting. The first well, as I mentioned, that we did back in 2020, in April of 2020, we had a kind of a standard mix design, and the mix design called for a lost circulation material. And so I went and sourced the lost circulation material. You'll love this. The lost circulation material was called celloflake, and celloflake is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally broken up pieces of cellophane, plastic, that you put into the mix. When I was in North Dakota at Red River Oilfield Services, we sold many varieties of lost circulation material, everything from walnut shells to, look like grass clippings to literally cut up dollar bills, old currency then that they would shred and put in. So in looking at that celloflake material, I was, number one, a little bit disappointed in the cost of the material because they thought a lot of that, plastic bags, but it was also very difficult to source. It wasn't something that you don't run down to Ace Hardware and pick it up, right, when you need it. And so we started exploring into this hemp world. And of course, I had met Ken and Morgan Elliott through some mutual friends there. And kind of in this discussion, we decided, hey, let's give this hemp herd a whirl. Well, we did on the next couple of wells and really found it to work fantastic. It was easy to work with. If you spilled it on the ground, it was, you didn't have to worry about picking up all these little pieces of plastic that were blowing all over the countryside. And it performed outstandingly. And so one of the things that we started doing is we're introducing this into our mix. Of course, we had to get it approved by the regulatory authorities. And so what we did then is we entered into an agreement with Montana Technical University to actually start performing some studies with us on our behalf. So we paid for a study at Montana Tech, and the outcome of the study, or the basis, I should say, of the study was really to show against the industry standards that the use of hemp in these varying degrees did not degrade the performance characteristics of the cement material. So in other words, and there's various ways of measuring that. Mostly it's in the compressive strength. And so what we did is we entered into a research project with Montana Tech. We had one of our students there that ran the program for us. We kind of gave them these parameters, which was essentially, look, we want you to put as much hemp into this mix as you can until we lose our compressive strength. And so that's what we did. And we came up sort of with this parameter then of how much hemp we could put into a mix and still be able to maintain that strength. And then, of course, the other side of that. Now, that's great because that's in the lab. The other issue is over in the field side. And so what we did then is we took that individual, and his name is Rob Braden, who is the graduate student from Montana Tech. And in fact, many of your viewers may have had an opportunity to meet Rob at the hemp event there in Fort Benton this summer. He was there and was presenting on our behalf. Well, I was back working, of course, but I had to give the kids throw them a bone and let them get out there and participate with the hempsters. But So what we did then is we felt that it was important to take it from the lab to the field. So we actually hired Rob as an intern for the summer, and his job, in and amongst all of the other duties of measuring methane and putting up with my crazy all summer, was to be our field representative for the sort of the quality control engineer for the mixing of hemp with the roughnecks. Of course, the roughnecks, they were a little sort of tough to bring along on this journey. They weren't really loving that they were using hemp in this mix and weren't really, showing, it was something that they had never really used before. And as I mentioned earlier, remember the oil and gas industry is very traditional, very relational. And so anytime you're introducing a new product into the industry, you really have to sort of, kind of walk people through it and have some patience and provide those boots on the ground to make sure that people are comfortable with how the product's being used. Because again, and I've seen this with our crews, not only in Montana, but in Pennsylvania recently, that left to their own devices. And when I was a young project manager, I had a salty old mentor that told me, look, your contractors don't do what you expect; they do what you inspect. So you better make sure that you got your eyes on them. And sure enough, if you turn your back, the cement will go down the hole and the hemp is sitting right there where you left it, right? And it's like, well, why didn't you put the hemp in? Well, anyway, so we kind of worked through all of those programs. And so again, having a QC engineer that's representing the foundation is part of our program now, so that we make sure the hemp goes in. But the other side of that, and this was sort of that live and learn thing, is that we found out that while we can put a certain percentage of hemp in the laboratory, it doesn't necessarily work in the pumping unit because we need to be able to pump it. And so one of the things that we found is kind of sort of through this shock therapy is that if we put too much hemp in all at once, it's going to suck all the moisture out of the cement and we're going to start breaking stuff. And so, of course, that really, our pumpers really appreciated us then that day as we were having to tear the equipment apart and chip everything out. So we've had some interesting lessons through the process, but we've got it down to a very refined program now, and we've been embellishing on that. We've got a system now where we're pre-hydrating the hemp before we actually introduce it into the cement, so that we lose kind of that shock factor. But ultimately, Mandi, what we're doing is we're adding as much hemp as we can, and part of the reason for that, of course, it's great material to use, and it performs outstandingly in the formation. But it's also to take and try and reduce the impact of the cement that we're using in our plugging design. And what happens is that through the development of the methodology for carbon credits for the methane that we're stopping, greenhouse gas emissions that we are eliminating as part of this work, we get hit in our own accounting for the amount of cement that we use. And it's almost like a 1-for-1 ratio. So for every ton of cement we use, we get a deduction of a ton of offset, because it's just so carbon intensive to produce the cement. So our thought was, well, let's use hemp then, or another, added benefit of using hemp is the fact that it reduces the carbon footprint of the work that we're doing also. So it's really got, a win-win associated with introducing hemp into the plugging design. So with that said, now we've got industrial hemp is approved in Montana. It's approved in Pennsylvania. We're just getting ready to do our first plugs here. Like I said, I'm sitting in Shreveport right now, here up in the Black Bayou of Louisiana, here before the end of the year. And, so we're starting to see this become more and more of a thing in the plugging side. And this is not, I guess what's important is that this approval of the cement admix or the hemp herd is something that can be used not only in the plugging and abandonment of orphaned oil wells, but can also be used in other cementing, oil field cementing as well. And whether it's, cementing the outside of casing of a production string. So there's lots of application in the oil and gas industry for this industrial hemp. And so that's part of what we're working on next is the marketing of that product and the introduction of that product into the market. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, based on our lessons learned, it means that we've got to have, field representatives and technical engineers on location with these folks to be able to kind of make sure we keep everybody, going down the same road.
Awesome. Well, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by everything you're doing, and I'm excited. I've got some questions for you, but before I do, I really want to give a shout out to everybody that's joining. Tanya, thank you very much. Jeff, as always, thank you much for joining. Paul, Rion, let's see, Marianne, and Alex, and Kayla. Kayla, thanks very much. Great question. She's curious, how do people get involved?
Well, so the Well Done Foundation, we do have a volunteer program, and so there is a pathway on the website to be able to contact us and sign up in the volunteer world. We've got a questionnaire then that goes out to folks that show interest so that we can understand, number one, where you're at, sort of what your areas of interest are, and start to pair you up. And then, of course, what we'll do is we actually have an orientation then that we run our volunteers through. In fact, we just graduated our first classes several weeks ago. So we've got the first graduating class of Well Done You. Pretty exciting. And
who's going through that program?
So we've got, it's such a diverse group,
Okay.
Doctors, lawyers, school teachers, retirees, active duty folks, all over the place. And so what we're doing is then we're creating that database and providing opportunities for folks to get involved in these various areas that we're working. Not everybody lives in Montana. Not everybody wants to make the journey to Montana to come help us plug a well. Although, we certainly love to have folks out there. But as we're working in the east, as we're working in the south now, we'll have more and more opportunities. And oftentimes, what those volunteer opportunities are, and we've got several categories. Some of those are in sort of the front end measuring and monitoring. Of course, everybody can participate, through, social media by helping to share our posts and, move those along. But then also, we have certainly slots available during the plugging activity for people to show up and check out. And, we've had folks from the hemp industry who have participated with us in the plugging, and they've got to be right there, hands-on, putting the hemp herd into the cement mix with us. And then one of the bigger opportunities is that when we finish up the plugging and on the surface remediation or the surface restoration side, that's a little safer, a little easier to manage. It's more conducive to a group setting. We actually we've had several of those where we've had companies come in and use it kind of as a team building event. So lots of opportunities. We've got several categories. So if folks are interested, encourage them to go to the site and contact Catherine Bobbitt, who's our volunteer coordinator.
Awesome. Okay, I did share your website, so you guys, if you do have anything, reach out. I did see just now Ken gave another shout out. He's on, so thank you very much for joining today, Ken. I had to give both you and Morgan a shout out earlier. I should have added Greg in there because you guys are doing great things, and I really appreciate the connection as well. Jeff just said that he's going to search for orphan wells right now.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Jeff should give me a call then, and let's see how we can help each other out there. Because, one of the things about this, of course, is that the orphan wells are prevalent in certain areas. The biggest thing, I just want to make sure that we don't have anybody out there trespassing. And safety is absolutely number one. So we are super cautious about, how we approach these projects. And, not everybody shares the love of plugging orphan and abandoned wells. And, we have found some grumpy surface owners. And some of them are certainly practicing their Second Amendment rights. So just as a heads up, please don't go out there, unless you've made good contact. But there's a lot going on. There are certain areas, on public lands where access is a little bit easier, a little less complicated. But it should always be a safety concern in terms of access, in terms of the presence of gas. Some wells do have a fairly significant signature of other gases besides methane, such as hydrogen sulfide gas, which can be quite deadly in a concentrated form. So, yeah, it's definitely something that we encourage folks to be very cautious about. So, not that we want to discourage anybody from going out there, but give me a call first, and maybe I can help you avoid some pitfalls.
Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about all these other products and opportunities from the hemp industry, especially into the oil and gas. What future products are you guys going to be playing with? Where do you see opportunity for the Well Done Foundation to really dabble in other products?
Sure. So, definitely on the hemp side, looking at variations to the lost circulation material that we're using right now. The other aspect that we're working on is in some of the completions aspects. So even in sort of the more standard oil and gas space, where they're using various products in the hydraulic fracturing side. So this is an area that we're starting to work with some of the hemp oil, some of the seed oils in that space. Obviously, the fiber side is fairly defined, but we think that there's going to be a tremendous opportunity. And what we love now is the fact that we've got a producing facility fairly close to us out in Fort Benton with IND Hemp. Is that we're talking with that team now about these various research products or projects and the ability to kind of co-brand and co-market and move into that space. So yeah, we've got some ambitious goals as far as kind of working with those folks. And the key is it's awesome to have that lab there. And then of course I mentioned the Montana Tech School of Engineering, petroleum engineering, that's available for us with their full materials lab, and to really be able to do some additional testing.
Awesome. Greg had a really good question here, and I meant to ask this earlier when I'm trying to figure out, acreage or opportunity for hemp. How many pounds or tons of hemp are you able to put into a well or a plug mix?
Sure, you bet. And of course, that a lot of the times will vary on the particular depth of the well. But if we can put a couple 100 pounds into a well bore, then that's a pretty significant achievement. Of course, you think about that, that's quite a bit of material. You think about the number of bags. So because we need to keep the product in a form that is familiar with the oil and gas industry. We end up then specifically packaging it in such a way that it's the look and feel is similar to other stuff that they're using. So we're not introducing some new system, because again, this is not, they're not the guys that you really want to do that with, because if they don't like it, it'll, like I said, you'll walk up to the
too different. Or if it's too different, it's the new process. I feel like that and the construction industry are about the same, right?
Yes.
Old dogs, new tricks.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to be very, cautious about that. But it is, like I said, so to answer your question, a couple 100 pounds is a good well. Again, the key is having engineering staff on site there to make sure that it's going in at the rate that it needs to go in. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So talk to me about future of the industrial hemp industry for the oil and gas.
Well, I think there's a huge emerging opportunity there. And, part of what can happen now is the discussion around the environmental benefit of using hemp. So the carbon capture component of hemp itself. So in other words, by using this material, what are we offsetting by using that? And so one of the areas that we obviously are working closely on is developing methodologies then for developing carbon credits for the cultivation and processing of hemp. And with that, it's how do we preserve kind of enough value, if you would, of those carbon credits all the way through the chain. It's interesting because, of course, as you can imagine, in that continuum, everybody wants their cut, if you would, or some, like the farmer would say, well, I want it all because I'm farming, right? And then, of course, you've got the producers who are like, well, wait a minute, I'm producing this material and refining it, and so I need my part. So we need to make sure, I guess where I'm going with all this is we need to make sure that we preserve a portion of that to give back to the oil and gas industry, right? So in other words, in order for it to be desirable to them, because they're literally faced with hundreds of products that are available. So how do we differentiate, and how do we stand out then as this viable product? Is we've got to be able to give something back. And so that, in my opinion, is going to be one of those differentiators where we can, and that's what we are doing as part of our product mix, is we're actually offering them a certain number of our own trademark products called a climate benefit unit. That's our own carbon credit, if you would, as part of that. So, you buy a 12-pound bag of our lost circulation material, and we'll throw in a 1 ton of offset. So, but that certainly is going to be an area, because now, and we've seen this large discussion happening in the oil and gas industry about transition, about ESG focus within the industry, about sort of kind of cleaning up their own house, if you would.
Yeah.
And so the utilization of this material is critical. And so it's not only in the downhole applications, but it can also be used in things like spill response or sediment control. And so there's lots of applications that where industrial hemp then can enter into that industry, in a safe space, and really start to build that confidence or that familiarity in the industry. So
I love how you brought up your method to bring product to market, and really, addressing their pain point around the carbon capture and the credits that then they can take a value, right? It's because, like you said, it's as much as a pain point as this industry has been around the carbon, I see a lot of them actively trying to make change and figure out where do they fit in this process and how are they going to do it. And so
Yeah, and this is new development. I mean, this conversation if I was on your show this time last year, wouldn't even have been a thing. But I think that in about a year's time, we've seen there's been this transition and this newer focus, or more of a, I should say, an acute focus on what should and what can the oil and gas industry be doing in this space. Of course, there's still holdouts. There's still the old school folks that will never sort of get it or never embrace it. But many of the call it the sort of the more with it oil and gas companies have figured it out and are figuring it out quickly, and they understand that this is the social license. I mean, this is the cost of doing business. And so it's good to see folks then that are, instead of it being, trying to push, water up a rope, now all of a sudden it's something that they're very open to. And yeah, then that way they get some value, to your point, Mandi, at the end of the day.
Or it's at least what settles with them, right? It's what they need to make that sale. Jeff made a good comment here, and it's really true. It's funny, but give back to the oil industry is a bizarre sentence. Yeah, I agree. I look at this more as like, what is it that they need to make that purchase, to make that transition? And if it is just that thought that they get 1 credit or 1 tons of credit, to me, it's a selling point, right?
You have to start somewhere. And, that's really that's creating that comfort level and, that trust, if you would, between the industries. Again, the oil and gas industry is strong in terms of their buying power and in terms of their sort of their regulatory influence. And so finding a way to develop some common ground, I think, is only going to make the industrial hemp industry stronger. And, again, it creates marketplace, which is critical, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a quick, and I want to give a shout out again to the folks in Fort Benton. One of the things that we're working on right now, and we're happy, the Well Done Foundation is happy to be hosting some grower meetings for IND Hemp in the Golden Triangle of Montana, out at our headquarters there in Shelby. But one of the things that we're working on, we've just finished up a 40-acre project in Montana where we plugged 9 wells in this farmer's field out there. One of the first guys I had met up there in the Golden Triangle.
How cool.
And now we're working with him then to actually plant a hemp crop on that 40-acre tract. So for us, it's kind of a super cool story because it takes it 100% full circle. And this guy is...
Are you doing any work to figure out what's remediated from the soil off of that crop?
Well, that's one of the discussion points as well, in terms of looking at using that to help to sort of regenerate the soil. We do some work as part of our surface restoration, but there's, this particular 40-acre site, in fact, had about 4 acres. So about 10% of that tract was impacted by either the pump jack locations or the evaporation pit or the tank batteries. So, we've got quite a bit of restoration work that crews are working on right now up there. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to use that, that hemp crop this year as a way to help to juice that soil back up. So we don't have data on that yet, Mandi, but this is going to be a fun
something you're looking into. Yeah, I just look at, like you said, the full circle of what's been able to be done and the difference that you'll be able to show that it's made in that area is very impactful. What a story. And really, it's the story everybody's looking for, right? And everybody wants it today. Just we have to realize that we've got a couple planting seasons before we really know the difference.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, cool. I so appreciate you. I don't know if you saw this comment from Brandon. And Brandon, thank you very much. I love it when I know your name so I can give you a shout out. But wondering about Brackish Water,
Mm-hmm.
water
Yeah.
in wells, and if they're used for a water source to clean.
So sometimes when we are cleaning a well out to plug it, or when we're even pumping cement down into the well bore, we will displace a certain amount of fluid in the hole. And we certainly we have a fluids management program where we take that material and we then dispose of it. But we have seen some wells then that are producing water. In fact, I just received a note today from the regulators here in Louisiana of a well that they've got that is flowing water and gas at the same time. What happens is often is that casing will deteriorate and perforate, and so it starts to pick up artesians from sort of this formation up from the oil bearing layer. So managing water is a critical component. We've got several sites in Pennsylvania that have some of the very same issues. And so that's where water quality can really become a big issue. Those tend to be obviously more complex projects for us. And so we end up bringing in more players to the team. We end up involving the water quality regulatory agencies and on top of the oil and gas folks. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but it's absolutely a focus and a concern. We try to flesh that out on the due diligence side before we end up, with hip waders on.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, I don't know a lot about this industry or the ins and outs about how it's done. So I always appreciate you guys asking questions because you understand some of this better than I do. Well, Curtis, I would love to continue this conversation. I'd love to continue to support you the best that we can. I'm really super thankful for everything that you're doing and the connections that you've made and supporting our farmers. I'd love to follow along and help share what you figure out about the farm up in Montana. And I saw that there's another one, Greg and Bradley, be sure to connect with Ben over at IND Hemp. They've got a big operation up in Montana. And shout out to Montana also. You guys are doing some serious work and really leading the charge. It's exciting to watch all that you guys have got going on. So thank you very, very much. Anything else you want to add? And then I'd love to get to this question real quick.
Sure.
John? He said what is the aperture size range that you're able to bridge into introducing hemp into the cement mix? How much less cement do you need to plug a well when you reduce lost circulation with your hemp additive? That's a really good question.
Sure. We've got some material, John, that probably the best way to manage that would be offline. We can supply you with some of the details on the size range of the material we're using, and then the amount of material that we're using, per ton of cement, then, if you would. So, I see your question there. I think that's probably going to be the best way to handle that, and I'd love to address that with you and talk you through that.
I'll send you both an email intro. John's a rock star. He's a member and a great supporter for the association. So I'll definitely send over an email intro and get you guys connected. I see too, Bradley says, make sure you've got a pickle barrel sandwich for him today. I feel like I'm out here. Okay, well, awesome. I really appreciate everything. Anything else we want to add or anything that you'd like to share? You said too, it's Giving Tuesday. Do you guys have an opportunity for people to give on your website and donate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we appreciate every opportunity. And, if you get a chance, check it out at www.welldonfoundation.org. We've just kind of revamped our website there. We're looking forward to continuing this relationship with the Global Hemp Association and the industrial hemp industry. I would tell you that, any opportunity is one that I think you'll find that we're super creative and love thinking outside of the box. So there's a lot of work out there, and I think we're just getting started in this relationship. So appreciate this opportunity, Mandi, and look forward to staying connected with you.
Well, I sure appreciate you. Thank you very, very much. And everybody else, I look forward to seeing you. We have an event this afternoon. You'll find it on our LinkedIn page. It's our farmers meeting. You'll be able to log in and have an opportunity to talk. Andrew Bish is presenting his seed trials and some information about harvest this last season to hopefully help some of our farmers. And then next, I think on tomorrow, we've got our networking event. And for those of you that haven't joined our networking event before, be sure that you log in. You get an opportunity to break off and speak to 4 or 5 different people a couple different times and build relationships. Other than that, Curtis, thank you very much. Thank you for everything that you're doing and your team is doing. And we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.